Well, you don't know that. You
All right, I'd like to call to order the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for October 15th, 2020. First item on the agenda is roll call.
It appears that everyone here except for Mr. Bennett is present. All those appointed to the board are here except for Mr. Ryan Bennett. And so we have a quorum to proceed.
Okay. Request for staff confirmation that the Kansas Open Meeting Act requirement notice has been properly provided.
We'll look to Margie, and she assures us that the packet was posted on Friday when it went out to the website and out to the applicants and to board members. So we have an open meeting that we can conduct this afternoon.
Okay. Approval of minutes for the September 17th, 2020 regular meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from the September 17th meeting.
Second.
Okay. It's been approved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those not in favor?
You've double checked, and those of you who are elected officers have accepted that responsibility. Wasn't a surprise to you or anything, so.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so we are on to new business, and first order of new business is application V20-3.
This application has been filed by Steve and Kendra Johnson, and they own property at 2255 Shalimar Drive, and they're requesting a maximum garage size variance of 384 square feet. And that request is to allow a covered shade structure or covered patio to extend off of the north side of an existing detached garage. And so their property is lot 24, less the north 1.5 feet thereof in block 2 of the replat of Mayfair Edition. And to get your bearings, this property is 1 block east of Ohio, and it's just south of Nottingham Drive on the east side of the street. So the Mayfair Edition itself, the original Mayfair Edition, was platted in 1961, and it was actually original time of platting. It was in the county at that time and annexed into the city, and then the southern portion, which contains much of the replat, was done in 1981. On this particular property, a new single-family home was built in 1987, and it was purchased by Steve and Kendra Johnson. And our records show that the Johnsons have owned and resided in this home since it was built in 1987. And the original records show that the house with an attached garage has a building footprint of 1,828 square feet, and the lot size is 8,280 square feet, which is pretty typical for this neighborhood. In 1999, the Johnsons constructed a 24 by 32 foot detached garage in their backyard. That garage is accessed from a driveway constructed along the south side of the house. With the addition of that garage, that maxed out the lot coverage at that time. But in 2003, partially on recommendation from the Board of Zoning Appeals, it was recognized that lot sizes were not growing, but garages were growing and some house sizes were growing. So the allowable lot coverage in R1 zoned areas was increased from 30 to 35%. We had various forms of shutdowns and lockdowns and things in the spring of this year and the early part of the summer, and so that created some communication challenges. And as our staff report indicates, staff spent a good part of the summer corresponding with the Johnsons and their contractor about the desire to construct some form of shade structure on the north side of their detached garage. One of the things I noticed when I was reviewing this, that is, I had an aerial photo and it showed a very large tree north of the garage. that you couldn't even see the backyard. And then we got our 2020 aerial photos, and you could see the backyard. And so the tree that was there was struck by lightning and was taken down. And so in this photo, you can see that there is no tree in the backyard. But if you look at the backyard and the relationship between the garage and the house, you can see that there is limited options for having any sort of covered patio or deck at the rear of the house. So, as I noted, we had a lot of correspondence back and forth over the summer between staff and the applicants. And finally in August, we were able to arrange an in-person meeting and kind of come to a meeting of the minds of what their preferred plan was. So the plan that was to be put forward is the one that's before you today, and that is to construct a 16-foot by 24-foot shade structure that would be attached to the north wall of the garage. And as we looked at that, because it's essentially an extension of the garage, we determined that a maximum garage size variance and a lot coverage variance would be needed to issue a permit for that construction. So this application was filed on August 24th and scheduled for a hearing today. I think you're aware that the maximum garage size on a conventional residential lot is 24 by 32, so the Johnsons already have the maximum size of garage on a typical residential lot. So this is essentially to add 384 square feet of covered space adjacent to that. And as I noted, the maximum lot coverage in R1 is 35%. You see in the surrounding area, it is predominantly a single-family residential area. All the adjoining property is single-family use and zoned R1. Most of the lots are roughly the same size, so there's not a great deal of variation or uniqueness as to the lots. What the applicants state in terms of uniqueness is that the location of the existing detached garage in relation to the rear of their house limits the places that a covered patio can be located, and this requires the patio to be attached to the garage instead of the house, as you might typically see. The applicant's lot is unique from the standpoint of having a detached garage in their yard. It's very few lots in the Mayfair addition have a detached garage in addition to an attached garage. And we even made note of the fact that back in 1999 there was a rear patio that was in existence that was removed in order to make room for the garage. There's 9 feet between the garage and the house, and that is a fairly unusual situation. The other thing that you have is, because you have utility easements back here, you can't really slide the garage back any farther this way because of the presence of utility easements. In terms of effect on neighbors, the applicants state that the proposed shade structure will match the east-west dimensions of the existing garage, be located on the interior side of the garage, so it should not be noticeable to neighboring property owners. We agree that it will be oriented towards the inward side of their lot. As far as impacts, we would like the applicants to provide just a little bit more information about the material and color of the shade structure to see how it will blend in with the garage. As far as the hardship, the applicants state that if the garage size limit is strictly applied to their lot, they will not be able to have any form of rear covered patio. If there was sufficient space at the back of their house, they could build a covered patio and wouldn't need a variance to do so. We would agree that if they're left at 24 by 32, they would not be able to have any sort of attached covered patio. It's not really feasible to attach one to the back of the house. What we would request that the applicants provide you with some additional information about what the hardship would be if the dimensions of the shade structure had to be changed, if it was reduced in width or length, what that impact would be. We don't see any impact on public health or safety. One of the things that we looked at also is a conformity with the spirit and intent of the ordinance. The reason we have a maximum garage size is so that we don't have commercial proportioned storage buildings or storage buildings that are larger than homes in our residential areas. And the applicants are pointing out that they're not going to increase the height or the usable storage space within the existing garage. And that garage has been in place for 21 years, so the neighbors are certainly used to the presence of that garage. The request would only allow a covered patio to be attached to the garage instead of the house. So what we just pointed out was that the existing improvement on the applicant's lot cover a little over 31%, primarily because there's an attached garage and a detached garage. If you look at the backyard area, the backyard of the applicant's lot contains a little over 3,000 square feet, and if this request were approved, about 37.5% of their backyard would be covered by roof, with 62.5% left as green space. Their total lot coverage would be 36%, which is 1% over the 35% maximum. So we have a concept drawing that was in your packet and we put on the screen. It's pretty conceptual, and it appears the structure would have a sloped metal roof and metal post supports. We would request that, again, the applicant provide a little bit more information about color and material. But the question before you today is whether the addition of this shade structure would be too much building for the size of this lot, the size of the house, and the surrounding neighborhood. So we've identified 4 alternatives. You could approve the requested garage size and lot coverage variances as requested. You could approve a lesser variance than requested, in other words, allow the shade structure, but reduce the dimensions that you, from 16 to 20 by 24 to some other dimensions. You could postpone action on the application if you think additional information is needed, or you could deny the applicant's request if you don't think findings can be made to support a variance. So from our perspective, we're hopeful that the applicants can provide a little more information about the design, the materials, and the color of their proposed shade structure, and also the hardship that would result if the shade structure was smaller than 16 by 24. If they provide that information to your satisfaction and you want to approve this request, we have 3 recommended conditions there on page 7 that would only come into play if you want to approve this request. We've also taken our staff report and turned them into some possible findings for you attached to the report. So with that, I'd be open to any questions that you have, or we can go back to any aerial photos or graphics or anything else that board members would want to see. If not, then we would hear from the applicant.
So I have a question. If a 16 by 24, if those dimensions take us over the allowed percentage, what size structure would be within the parameters?
Well, I have somewhere in here, I have a spreadsheet that I did over the summer while we were trading emails and discussing. It appears that a 12 by 24 structure, if it was 12 feet wide or 24 feet wide, extending 12 feet out, that would put them underneath the 35% lot coverage and would eliminate the need for a lot coverage variance. It would still require some form of garage size variance, but instead of being 1,154 total square feet, it would be 1,058 square feet. So it would reduce it would still require a garage size variance, but it would not require a lot coverage variance if it was 12 by 24 instead of 16 by 24.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
I might have a question. Have the neighboring homeowners been notified? Do they have any input as to their thoughts?
Well, what our procedure is that we identify, and Dustin, if you want to go to an aerial or the vicinity map, I can. What we do is, on a variance case, we notify all adjacent property owners, so this owner, this owner, this owner, this owner, this owner, and this owner, receive mail notice of the Johnson's proposal, and the letter provides them with the opportunity to either provide input to staff ahead of the meeting by an email or letter or phone call, or that they can come to the hearing today and speak. We did not receive any correspondence, and you didn't receive any phone calls. I did not, so I didn't field any calls from any neighbors after we sent our notice out, and we'll just have to wait to see if any of the neighbors are here present. But we mailed notice out to all the adjacent property owners explaining what the Johnsons were proposing to do, and the options that we give them are either to provide us with written correspondence, which we would provide to you, or to come to the meeting and speak.
Thank you.
Okay, comments by the applicant? And can you please state your name and address?
Steve Johnson, 2255 Shalimar Drive. I think it sounded like there was only about 4-foot difference from what Mr. Andrews indicated would be acceptable, other than the lot coverage, I think you indicated.
It would still require a garage size variance, but
Okay.
if the options I gave, one of the options was to approve a variance, but just a lesser variance than requested. And what I calculated that under option 2, if they approved a lesser variance, which would, a 12 by 24 dimension would not increase the lot coverage above 35%.
I think the reason asking for that 4-foot extension from that would be to have coverage over the entire patio. So which that would allow us to have that coverage whether it was raining or for shade, either one. I think also Mr. Andrews indicated it was going to be steel post. We intend to go with cedar post. So it's going to be a nice looking structure that will match up with the shed. It'll have the same color roof as the shed, which is a dark brown. So we'll match as close as we can to that. So it basically looks like an extension of the shed. Be treated wood is what the framework will be built out of, other than the cedar posts that will be on all 4 corners, and I believe also one in the middle on the outside edge of that. So, is there any other questions that I could answer on that? Or
Can you go back to the aerial photo? So the current roof material on the garage is what?
it's a metal roof.
It is a metal roof?
Metal shed with a metal roof, yes.
Okay.
It's a
And-
two-tone. It's kind of a light tan for the shed and then a dark brown roof. It matches our house pretty much, very closely, I should say. I was almost going to say identical, but it's real close.
Okay, so same type of material then going out on the extension,
Yes.
same color?
Yes, and then like I said, with the 4x4 or 6x6, we're still looking at that as far as the cedar post, so it does look very nice. It's not going to be a steel post.
Gotcha.
You're saying that this dimension from here out to the edge of this, and one of the things, and you can clarify for me, as I was reviewing the plans, it seemed like the roof line of the shade structure actually kind of followed this curvature. So is it going to be a rectangular structure, or
Yeah.
is there going to be a kind of a curvature?
It'd be rectangular. And so the posts, the 2 outside posts would be in the yard, with the cement, and then so we have a rectangular structure with adjacent to the shed, so it would look basically just like an extension of the shed. When the tree was there, it covered the entire backyard. There was no visibility for any of the neighbors, and it was probably, the lower branches were only about this high off the ground, so they could never see through there. Even with this built, there would be more visibility than what they've ever had before, I think, with this shade structure versus that tree. And there was no patio when that tree was there. Once the tree, it actually was hit by lightning twice. We left it for a while, about a third of the tree was still left, or I'm sorry, a third of it was demolished during the lightning strike, and then we had another one, or a windstorm, I think, and at that point we had to remove the tree, and that's when we put the patio in.
So beyond the fact of just trying to make sure that you cover that entire concrete area to go out to the 16 feet, is there another reason for having the 16 feet beyond the 12 feet so that there wouldn't be a variance?
Yeah, I think, well, obviously we'd like to have shade, and you can see there's a little bit there now. That looks like that was probably taken around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if there's a time frame on that stamp of when that picture was taken, but it's in the evenings when it's really the worst part, when we'd want to go out after work in the evenings during the summertime. That sun comes over and pretty much covers the entire, that entire patio except that part right up next to the house, and that's where the air conditioner is. That's why that's curved as it comes up towards the house. There's a rock garden right there, and then that's where the central air conditioning system is. So pretty much all of that is in the shade, so that's why we would like to cover that entire part, so we'd be able to utilize it all. But I think at the time frame that picture was taken, very seldom would we be out there probably, so I could see there's a little bit of shade there, but it seems to be much worse in the afternoon, evenings when we'd want to be out there, and it gets extremely hot on that concrete.
I just want to clarify that reducing it in size doesn't eliminate the need for a variance altogether. What it does is, instead of two variances, which would be size and total lot coverage, if it was a lesser dimension, if it was only adding 288 square feet, it would be under the 35% and would eliminate the need for one of the two variances. But the way we set this up was met with the Johnsons about what their preferred plan was. Their preferred plan was to cover the entire concrete patio, so we structured the variance so that there's two requests. One is to increase the garage size by an additional 16 by 24 dimension, and the result of that would be a lot coverage that's over 35%. So we identified the need for two variances to approve that particular plan.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Comments by interested citizens? Okay, doesn't look like there's any comments by interested citizens, so discussions?
Just from a practical standpoint, and Mr. Johnson may want to get it back up and speak to that, but if there's a proposal for some lesser dimension, that probably means the supports are going to be going through the existing concrete as opposed to being set in the yard, and so that is a consideration in terms of having coverage over the entire patio. How those supports are done and where the post supports are located would probably put them in the existing concrete area if a lesser dimension were involved. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I don't know if the Johnsons have thought about that in terms of how it might change the construction.
Okay.
So as I identified that we did provide notice, and I don't know if, Mr. Johnson, if you've had any personal visits with any of your neighbors, or if they're aware of this, and that might be one reason why no one felt a need to come.
Yeah,
But
we've been there probably longer than anyone else in the neighborhood, and we know all of them and have talked to all of them, and no one had an issue, at least when we talked to
You
them
want to come to
directly.
the mic? The mic?
oh, you want to come up to the
Yeah,
microphone?
can you come up to
and-
the mic?
So that Margie can pick that up.
Yes, we've lived there longer than all of our neighbors in that area, and we visited with all of them, and they all had no issues when we talked to them directly. And I think most of them mentioned to us that they did receive notice of this meeting, and again, we had no indication from them that they had any issue with this. So.
Okay.
Got it.
Thank you.
Thank-
Questions, comments from board?
I'm just looking at it for the future of the property, and if the patio is already there, I don't see how it's gonna be I mean, it's just gonna help it. It's just gonna increase that property value. So you can't really do anything else back there anyway. There's no, I mean, you couldn't get a vehicle between there's really no, from the garage, there's no way you could actually like get out and drive a vehicle in that breezeway there, right?
Correct, yes. It's only
Yeah.
9 foot, and there's the steps obviously coming from the house.
That's what I'm thinking, yeah.
We have some other little small table and chair there as well, but.
So the front, or the patio that replaced where the tree was, when was that put in then?
The patio, I would say in the last 2 years.
Okay, so the tree went down when then?
It was several years ago. Yeah, we didn't replace it right away. We just started noticing that it was really hard when we had family come over to be in that small area between the shed and the house, and so that's when we thought it'd be nicer to have an actual patio area, and that's when we installed that.
Okay.
Then we started dealing with the sun.
Right.
Just for the board's benefit, we flew new aerial photos in March of this year. So this photo was flown in March of this year, and when I started working on this case, this was the aerial photo I had, and I was like, well, is this even the right lot? Where would you put a patio? And then when I got the new aerial photo, I realized what the situation was. So that was a 2017 spring aerial photo, and then the other one we have is the 2020 aerial photo. So I said when we first started looking at this, I had the 2017 aerial photo and wasn't sure I had the right lot, so.
Quick question too. So the type of fencing that you have around the yard?
Okay. It's a wood privacy fence to the north and also on the back side to the east, and then it's chain link on the side of the house to the south.
Gotcha.
So privacy for the north side, east side, and then chain link to the south.
So the south,
That's chain link there, yeah.
okay. But the east neighbor wouldn't actually see the extension very much. I mean,
Well,
it's
you
going to
can
be
see
partially.
they've got trees as well. Both neighbors to the back of us have trees.
Right.
And that's kind of, I mean, when ours was there was no visibility for anyone there for quite some time. And I think with this would actually would be more open than what it had been. I might also state that I'm looking at retirement in the next few years, and I'd like to spend a lot more time out there, and that was the other reason for going with the patio and then looking for the overhead structure is just a place that we can be, whether it's morning or late evening, so. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you again. Any other comments from board?
No.
Okay. Then I would make a motion to approve application V 20-3 for the approved requested garage size and lot coverage variance as requested. I would also recommend the staff recommendations on page 7 that the proposed structure and patio cover be compatible with design, constructions correspond to the plans as submitted to the board, and roof runoff should be directed onto the applicant's lot.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank
So
you.
for your benefit, Mr. Johnson, we'll get you a letter summarizing today's action and tell you the next steps about a building permit and all that.
Okay. Next public hearing item is application V20-4.
This is an application that's been filed by Mr. Kevin Korb, and the specific request is a maximum storage building size variance to go from 360 square feet, which is the maximum size that we can approve by right, to 512 square feet, which corresponds to a 16 by 32 foot structure. So the property that we're discussing here is located in Upper Mill Heights Addition Number 2, and that was approved as a subdivision in 1970, and the subdivision contains 11 single-family residential building lots. 4 of those front on Upper Mill Heights Drive, and the other 7 front on Upper Mill Heights Terrace, which is a short dead-end street that extends west from Upper Mill Heights Drive. Our records show that the street, Upper Mill Heights Drive, was constructed in 1974. And shortly after that, Max Bishop, who is a local architect, built a 3,500 square foot dwelling with an attached garage on the west side of Upper Mill Heights Drive at an address which is 600 Upper Mill Heights Drive. Mr. Bishop added an addition to the rear of the residence in 1987. In September of this year, the applicant, Mr. Korb, applied for a building permit to erect a 16 by 32 foot shed in his backyard. Planning staff reviewed the application and determined, first of all, that the proposed accessory building was a storage shed, and that the storage shed exceeded the maximum size allowed, which is 360 square feet. So the applicant received a plan review letter from staff giving him the option of reducing the size of the proposed storage building to 360 square feet, or applying for a maximum storage shed size variance, and he has chosen to file this application and is seeking to justify the larger size. So as you are aware, every residential lot can have one detached garage and one rear yard storage building or shed. The maximum garage size, as we discussed, is 24 by 32. The maximum storage building size is 360 square feet. This proposal is to erect a 512 square foot storage building with a slanted pitched roof to serve as a workshop and storage shed. It's 42% larger than the maximum size allowed in the city's accessory building regulations, but as justification, the applicant points out that his backyard is 90 feet deep and 150 feet wide, does not contain any other outbuildings, so the proposed outbuilding will not appear to be too big for the yard. He also states that additional size is needed to provide for his storage needs, and it's not feasible to construct a driveway to access a rear yard garage in this location. Again, we are primarily in a single-family zoned area. A couple of the lots to the north in the original Upper Mill Heights addition, that's zoned residential suburban because those are larger lot sizes. This property is zoned R, single-family. And the applicant states that his home is built wide and covers most of the width of the property. If not for this fact, he could add an additional garage space in the front without having to add additional concrete driveway. He says his home has a walkout basement and 4 of the 5 bedrooms are below grade from the front. Most of the basement is finished living area, and as a result, there's very little storage within the house itself. as we note, the lot is oversized at 27,000 square feet compared to a standard residential lot in the community. As we noted in our previous case, the Johnson's lot was 8,200 square feet. This is 2,700 square feet. However, if we look at the lot size in Upper Mill Heights Addition Number 2, it's not so unique from that standpoint. The primary unique conditions are the width of the house on the lot, which is approximately 110 feet wide, and the slope of the lot, which makes accessing the backyard with a driveway very challenging. The applicant's lot currently has no existing outbuildings, and this subdivision is unique from the standpoint that as we looked at aerial photos, there didn't appear to be any rear yard outbuildings on any of the lots in the subdivision. We did obtain a copy and have reviewed the covenants for Upper Mill Heights Number 2, and the covenants do not prohibit the construction of outbuildings. It just so happens that there doesn't appear to be any other outbuildings in the subdivision. In terms of the impact on neighbors, the applicant states that his proposed shed will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents because the building site cannot be seen from the street. It can only be seen by 3 houses in the area. There is significant tree cover, and the elevation of the backyard is more than 10 feet lower than the street. The structure will not block any views, except to a small part of his house, will not block the sun or change water runoff. The height will be significantly lower than the back of the house, and it will have the same materials, color, and roof type as the house. From staff's standpoint, it does appear that the design and appearance of the storage shed appear to be compatible with the existing dwelling. And although the shed exceeds the maximum size allowed, it's still smaller than a detached garage, which could be built in the same location. As we looked at the property, it appeared to us that the storage building location was remote and concealed from view. However, the property owner to the west at 1701 Upper Mill Heights objects to the construction of the proposed storage building, stating it would be directly in the sight line of the rear of his house. I think you have some written correspondence to that effect at your places there. As far as hardship, the applicant states if this were called a garage rather than a storage shed, the size would be acceptable. However, to make it a garage, there would have to be a driveway constructed from the street, and the unimproved distance from the building site to the street is about 75 feet. To add an 8-foot driveway would add several $1,000s to the cost with no benefits because the structure is needed for storage, not for vehicles. The applicant believes that strict application of the storage shed size limit to his property would constitute a hardship by denying the space he needs for secure, weather-protected storage on his property. Staff would just request that the applicant provide additional information about the hardship that would result if the storage shed were reduced in size to 16 by 20 or 16 by 22 instead of 16 by 32. And then if there's any portion that would be devoted to workshop as opposed to storage, we would appreciate receiving any information on that. The applicant states that the structure will be at least 24 feet from any other structure, limiting potential fire spread. There will be no high-risk items stored in the building. It will increase the value of the property, which will have a positive effect on surrounding properties. It doesn't appear to staff that this building would block sunlight or air or increase the risk of fire spread or impact drainage patterns on neighboring properties. Again, just as with garages, the purpose of the size limit is to keep residential areas looking residential by not allowing garages or sheds to be taller than or out of scale with the house that they serve. The applicant says that the variance will do no harm to any public or private interest, that the structure will be residential in appearance, will match the house, If it were called a garage, the size would be acceptable under the ordinance. He's only asking to change what it is called due to the impracticality of connecting it to the street by a driveway. Staff would note that the proposed 16 by 32 foot storage building would cover only about 4% of the backyard area, and combined with the existing house would cover about 16% of the lot. The maximum lot coverage in the R district is 30%. So, just as with the previous case, the question before the board is to consider whether this 16 by 32 foot storage building is too much building for the size of the lot, too much building for the size of the house, or too much building for the surrounding neighborhood. Your alternatives could be to approve the maximum storage building size variance as requested for 512 square feet. If you feel the required findings of fact can be made, you could approve a lesser variance than requested, a size less than 512 square feet but greater than 360 square feet. If you find that required findings of fact can be made, you could postpone action on this request. If you feel additional information is needed from the applicant, you could deny the applicant's request if you don't think findings can be made to support a variance. So, from our review and review of other storage shed applications throughout the community, it appears to staff that the proposed storage shed is residential in appearance. We would request the applicant to provide additional information about the hardship that would result if he were limited to a reduced size that conforms to the zoning ordinance. If that information is provided to your satisfaction and you wish to approve this request, then we've outlined some conditions, possible conditions for you on page 7 of the staff report. So with that, we'd be open to any questions that you have, or we can go back to any aerial photos or drawings or things that you would like to see.
Any questions for staff?
I'm sorry.
You go, no, you got it.
If a driveway were to be constructed to a rear garage on this property, does it have to be concrete, or could it be rock or other materials?
It may be an all-weather, dust-free surface from staff's perspective, but I can't speak to whether the covenants in Upper Mill Heights might require that it be paved. I can't speak to that, but from staff's perspective, it has to be an all-weather, dust-free surface.
Our correspondence says that there's enclosed photos and videos. I didn't know if we could see that.
Yes, we have one of the neighbors who has sent us some visual photographs and videos that they're willing to narrate once we get to the public speaking portion.
Okay.
Any other questions for staff at this point? Okay. Can we hear from the applicant? And please state name and address.
Kevin Korb, 600 Upper Mill Heights Drive. Well, I suppose I'd like to start by saying that my understanding is the purpose of this meeting is to approve a size variance, not whether I can build a structure at that location. It's a given that I'm able to build something, and it appears that the opposition from neighbors is that they don't want me to build anything at all. So I just wanted to mention that. As far as the size, there's some uniqueness to my house in that most of the basement is finished. A lot of houses have like a big mechanical storage room where you might see the heating and air units and the water heater. I have 2 heating and air units in my house, and they're in a closet where, when I walk into the closet, I've got about the space of this podium to walk in between them, and that's where those are at. And then there's another closet where there's about just enough room for the water heater. And then there is a small unfinished portion of the basement where right now, based on the amount of stuff that's in it, I have to walk sideways through it to get to things. So I would definitely like to increase my storage, both by moving some stuff out of that and some stuff out of the garage. There's some pretty sizable tools, some computer equipment. That's what I do for a living. And my wife and I actually went to one of those places that sells those the pre-built cabins, or the big storage sheds and stuff. And we looked at a 360 square foot unit. We went inside it, walked around, kind of planned where we would put different things, and it just wasn't sufficient. I believe that the 512 square feet, for a number of reasons, would be a lot more suitable to us. Another one of them being, I have no desire to turn this into a garage, but my understanding is that if we are approved for this variance, that it's the only accessory building that we can have, because it's kind of it's the garage and the shed, I guess, because of the size. And if I'm limiting myself to only one, I'd rather go on the larger side in case a future property owner would actually want to turn it into a garage or something. I don't want to do it because I like all the trees in the neighborhood. I would have to remove several large mature trees. I don't want to do that. Maybe at some point, if they ever get struck down by lightning or something, that might change my mind, or it might change a future property owner's mind. But I'd rather leave the option open for it to be, since it can be the only building once this takes place, I'd rather leave it open to be turned into a garage later if it could be.
Questions for the applicant?
Just to amplify or clarify on that, as we noted, every residential lot in Salina can have a backyard detached garage and one additional storage building up to 300 square feet in size. What we were suggesting on page 7 as a staff was that if a larger storage shed were approved, that it would be approved in lieu of the option to have a second building. And so essentially that would put on record that if this is approved, that this is the only outbuilding that would be allowed on the property, and that's actually more restrictive than most lots, which you could have up to 2 buildings. But that is something that the board has done in some other similar cases where it's basically improved, the larger size is improved in lieu of having a detached garage. So that is just a recommended condition that we had on page 7, and that would be for the discretion of the board.
Okay. And for clarification, then, if at some point in the future there is the application to convert it into a garage with the dustless surface material coming to it, there then could be another building added to it, because you would now have a detached garage and you could add a storage shed at that point in time, correct?
No, under that condition, it's still just a single building, and it's his and a future owner's choice whether to use it as a shed or a garage. But it would reserve the option to convert it to a garage, but it's still limited to that, unless that language in that recommended condition is clarified.
Because our current resident can add a detached garage and a storage shed, meeting those requirements. At this point in time, if this was converted to a detached garage in the future, it would be smaller than that minimum requirement, and then we could add the language that they'd still be eligible to build a 360-foot storage facility, no different than any other residential, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's all with your discretion.
Okay.
But the point here was to not have the larger storage shed and a detached garage.
Correct. Yep. Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
I could also comment that I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I was told by building inspector Jerry Hammerton that if I did build a driveway, or if I had to make it a garage and make a driveway, that it did have to be concrete. I don't know if that's actually the case or not, but that's what I was told.
I think
So that-
Mr. Andrews could clarify, but I think if it's ductless,
What
that would
is-
be.
And I don't know if that was just not a complete meeting of the minds. If you construct a garage, the garage has to have a concrete floor, the garage itself. And you can have a storage shed or storage building with a wooden floor, but you can't have a garage that doesn't have a concrete floor. So Mr. Hammerton could have been referring to the fact that to build a structure as a garage, the garage has to have a concrete floor. But that the driveway itself that connects from the existing driveway does not have to be paved with concrete under city code, just the floor of the garage.
So it could be asphalt.
You could have an asphalt driveway, you could have an aggregate driveway, you could have a concrete driveway, but I can't speak for Mr. Hammerton, but a garage itself has to have a concrete floor, and a storage shed does not have to have a concrete floor.
And for clarification, the aggregate would be gravel, but it had to be a certain
Gravel could
thickness.
be asphalt millings, it just has to provide an all-weather, dust-free surface.
So I guess the question back to, for me then to you is, have you looked into the cost besides a concrete driveway going back to that building?
Well, I know it would be significantly less. The concrete is only part of the issue. The other part of it is removing the mature trees, which is, in order to make room for a driveway that would be wide enough to get a car back there, I would have to remove a couple of fairly large trees, and I believe the cost to remove a tree per tree is about $1,500 to $2,000, so it's pretty costly. But it's not just that, it's that I don't want to remove the trees. That's kind of a characteristic of the neighborhood, is that it has a lot of trees just covering, like dividing properties, and it just looks kind of like a natural area, so I would like to avoid doing that if possible.
We don't really have a 3D view here, but I asked Mr. Hurst to turn on the contours. So I think those are 2-foot contours or 1 foot, Dustin?
So these are 2-foot contours, and if you look where my cursor is on the aerial photo, that has an elevation of 1290, and if you look down here, we are at 1274, so it's a substantial drop off there. Or actually, this is 1294 is where this one is to 1274. So from the northeast corner of the property to the southwest corner of the property, it drops 20 feet.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you, sir. Comments by interested citizens? If you have a comment, please.
I submitted a letter.
Can you please step to the podium and tell us your name and address, please?
My name is Glenn Stroller. If it's okay, I'll take this off. I can talk a little easier without it. I've been a resident behind Kevin's house at 1701 Upper Mill Terrace for 31 years. And as Kevin said, I'm not only opposed to the variance, I'm opposed to the building. And the reason is that, there's a few reasons, but I'll start with, I can actually see it from 3 sides of my house: the backyard, the side yard, and the front yard.
Glenn?
Yeah.
If you'd like, I can give you this if you'd like to
You know, I'll just point.
Okay.
I'll just point, I think, but thank you. My property is here, and I think it's lot 6. And the proposed construction site, I think, is right about here. So from my backyard, my side yard, and my front yard, I can see the entire project.
I have the video and the photographs that you sent if you'd like to go through
If you
those.
if you want to play at least the video, it would give a little bit of a perspective. That's Kevin's backyard. And that's the building. Do you have any of the other photos that you could?
Yes, and if you want to narrate or describe them, you can use you'll have to use the mic though, Glenn. You'll have to use the microphone.
The handheld, or this? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you mentioned the slope of the lots, and his does slope a lot, and so does mine. But when I saw the construction going on, it offended me, because I didn't know anything about it. And our relationship is somewhat strained anyway because of what I feel like is Kevin's lack of interest and maintenance in his backyard. For the 31 years that I've been there, I think you've been there, what, 6 or 5, Kevin? 5? Yeah. Our lots used to flow together in a sea of green. And when Kevin arrived, he quit taking care of his yard. And it's pretty upsetting to me because I'm very proud of mine. I don't know if you have a picture of what Kevin sees. So I saw the construction starting and I wondered what was going on, so I came to your department and I asked to see the building plans, and there were none. In short, the level of care that he gives to his property is hurtful and insulting to me because I work so hard at mine, and his used to look just like mine. I'm sorry, but a year ago he was cited for storing and accumulating brush in his backyard by the city and was asked to, and had to be asked to clean it up. And you mentioned that there are no other homes, I guess, in the development with storage sheds. And so this will be a first, and I know that if it happens, the next thing that'll happen is we'll probably want to put up some big privacy fences, and that has been taboo in our neighborhood for my lifetime. And there have been covenants and restrictions in our old association that prohibited fencing. The idea in the original neighborhood was that everything was open, beautiful, and flowed together. Does anybody have any questions for me? I think that's about all I have.
So you had mentioned covenants. Are those covenants still in place on the restriction of the fences?
You know, way before Kevin's arrival, we had a homeowners association, and as some of the original owners passed away and second and third generation owners moved in, the association really dissolved. which I guess means that it refers over to just the regular city ordinances.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because for me to stand before you and say that we have one is not true.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Can we go back to one of the other pictures showing from his house then? So this is from the applicant's house looking
That's from
into your
Kevin's
backyard,
house.
correct?
Uh-huh.
To the next photo, please. So this is from where on your house then?
That is from my backyard.
Okay, so this is your backyard, and then right past that small tree, is that where the
That's the construction site that's already
construction
started
site?
there.
Right there? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Next one, please. And then this is from where?
That would be from my front yard.
Okay. So from your
It's a
front yard.
wraparound
Right.
with Kevin above me.
So from your front yard, is this from a view like from your porch or?
No, that would be from, right in here. Right on this side of the, there's a sport court there.
There's a what? Sorry.
Sport court.
Sport court?
I took it from right here. But it's very unfortunate because I can see it from everywhere except the west side of my house.
Okay.
For point of reference, the proposed structure is roughly where my cursor is on the aerial photo, so you can kind of get a feel for the different angles that would view that particular structure.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say that, Kevin, I'm glad you're in my neighborhood. You have a lot more energy than I have, but you don't take any pride in your backyard from my perspective, but I admire your energy.
Any other comments from interested?
Do you have a video of 612 Upper Mill to the south of this property?
Not sure. Can you come to the podium, please, and state name and address, please?
Do you perhaps have a video of the south? I'm at 612, just directly south of the neighbor.
Gotcha. You don't have a video of that?
You don't have any?
Not a video, but there, you can see it from the
Well-
photos of Kevin's lot.
Okay. So this is,
Yeah, this is south. Yeah, that's right. Anyway, if you, I had the covenant mentioned. Is the covenant, has that been, I have hard hearing. I didn't hear about half of what you guys were talking about. But the covenant, the covenant didn't allow any building, no wash line posts, none of that. When I moved up there 25 years ago.
okay. And my understanding, at least from Mr. Strower, that there currently is not any covenants in place because there's currently not a homeowners association.
There's no covenant in place. But
At least that's what we've been reported so far.
See where my drive is there? Oh, and look out to the road. There's really very little area that he has access to that building he's talking about. He just about asked if he hauls anything in there with the trailer. There was a trailer sitting there, you see on the video. I don't see how he can get in there without driving over my property, and I'd like to keep grass in that area. Then somebody from here go out to look at it. I talked to somebody from the city, came out and looked at it. I pointed that out to him.
Do you know who you talked to?
Pardon?
Do you know who you spoke to from the city?
I don't know. He was driving a white truck one morning, and I don't know. He said it was checking that it had been reported that was a complaint about driving. Well, mostly for Mr. Strower's part. But anyway, I explained to him, and I don't see how he can make that bend even to get out of behind his house. There's no driveway to that place. And I'd like to have somebody come up and and look at it and just to know what we're all talking about.
Okay, and I believe that he's not talking about putting any type of drive in there, so whether he would be using a trailer to get anything back in through to that area, I can't address at this point in time. I mean, he could obviously carry objects back into that storage facility. He wouldn't necessarily have to have a trailer to take anything back there.
He wouldn't have to haul a trailer. He had a trailer sitting back in the backyard.
There's currently a trailer sitting in the backyard?
In
A
those
trailer?
photos.
Yeah, you got a picture of it right here.
Oh,
Right
that
there.
trailer.
And then I don't know how he would have got that back there without going over my property. I'd like to see somebody come out and just take a gander at it and see what you think. But anyway, I'd like to get along with my neighbors, you know, but it's just something that I won't be there. I'm retired, probably be in a nursing home in a year or two, and it's not much of my worry, but I've paid attention to the covenant for 25 years and took no wash line post, no nothing, and now we have a situation where Mr. Strower pointed out many of my thoughts.
Okay.
Are you Mr. Carlin at 612?
612 Upper Mill,
But
right directly south.
You're Norman Carlin?
Pardon?
You're Norman Carlin?
Yes.
Just for Margie's benefit? Okay. So for purpose of the minutes, that's Mr. Carlin. Just a couple thoughts on that. I have reviewed the covenants. They are still in effect. They've never been terminated. However, without an active homeowners association, you really don't have an entity to enforce the covenants. They're still there on paper, but I don't think there's any entity or active entity that would be enforcing them, but they have not been terminated. They still exist on paper. The other thing about these aerial photos that we provide you, while these are supposed to represent parcel boundaries, there's a good deal of distortion with the aerial photography depending on their angle. And so this property line, which appears to be right up against the applicant's house, that's not actually where the property line is. It's probably more in the center of those two homes, but the applicant does own property on the south side of the house. It's not a zero lot line house, but absent our ability to go out and actually locate pins and things like that, it's difficult for us to determine whether somebody's driving over somebody else's property unless we can readily available where those property pins or markers are. But I think we have a residential building inspector named Jerry Hammerton, and I'm pretty sure he is the one who's been out on this site one or two times at least. So I think the city employee that's being spoken of is probably Mr. Hammerton.
So I do have one question. So at least in the video, and it showed with the plastic storage building that is there, since that is not a permanent storage building, does that not meet within the requirements?
It is considered to be a it's not a structure. It's more analogous to a playhouse or a garden shed. It's below the size that would require a permit. And so in many settings that we have, people have a permitted storage building, and then they may have something that's small that is like a garden shed, or something that's very small that's probably just set on the ground, and wouldn't be considered a permanent structure. Not the same as the proposed 512 square foot building, which would have a foundation and a footing, would be considered a permanent structure.
I have a question, back to the covenants. So, does it state anything about outbuildings or garages?
It does. When I read them, it had language about where garages and outbuildings could be located, where they could be located, and you generally wouldn't have covenants that tell you where outbuildings can be located. If outbuildings weren't allowed, the only structures that aren't allowed are carports. But it says, no garage or other outbuilding shall be placed, erected, or maintained upon any part of the premises except for use in connection with the residence already constructed. And so it essentially means you can't have a garage or outbuilding without a house, which is consistent with city code. But it just means that if you have a garage or outbuilding, it has to be there to support the residents of the home. But the only structure that's prohibited is a carport. But it specifically mentions garages and other outbuildings. This would be considered an other outbuilding. So when staff identified that there didn't appear to be other freestanding outbuildings in the subdivision, we wanted to see if that was because the covenants prohibited them, and we did not find that the covenants prohibited them.
Thank you. Yes. Can you...
I'm a little bit confused about one issue, and that has to do with, I don't know if it matters or not, but it has to do with the use of the building. And it sounds to me today like it's going to be used as a storage building, and that may be correct, but in our last discussion, Kevin told me that he was building it for his wife so that she could conduct her exercise. She does personal training on the sideline. She's a very physically fit gal and works hard at that, and she does quite a bit of that in the garage, and he told me that they were going to build that building so they could use their garage for a garage. So I'm not sure what it's going to be used for.
Thank you.
Can the applicant speak to that?
Yeah. Can you address that, please, the applicant?
Yes, it's mainly, right now, my wife has some of her friends over, and they exercise together as a group in the garage. And there's a lot of equipment that she moves in and out, sometimes in the house when the weather isn't right. And that space would allow us to have places to move that stuff when it's to get it out of the garage, so that it's not in the way of the vehicles. And so it would definitely accommodate some of the exercise equipment. Would be some of the stuff that we would store in it. But it still primarily would be used like a storage shed. It's not. I mean, we're not running a business out of it or anything like that. It's her and friends that get together sometimes. So.
So you're going to be using it to store the fitness equipment that's currently in the garage for them to be able to use?
Yeah, that'll be part of, it'll be part of the storage area. I mean, like you might use any storage area for, you might have a punching bag in it, you know, one of those stand-up punching bags, or just different aerobics equipment or something. I mean, nothing huge like treadmills or anything like that, but just, you know, whatever exercise equipment she has, maybe small weights and stuff like that. But yeah, it's mostly for storage, and it's not. I mean, it's not like we're building a gym. I don't want to imply that or anything.
Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other comments by interested citizens? Discussions?
Well, we can't really prohibit him from having a building there if the covenants don't state that. It's just, right now, we're discussing the size of it.
He could build it regardless,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Well, not at that
not the
size,
size,
but
yeah.
Well, yeah, just to clarify, if Mr. Korb applied for a building permit to put up a 360 square foot shed in this location, we would not be here because we would have just issued the building permit over the counter. But because it's 512 square feet and not 360, that requires notice to neighboring property owners and this hearing today. So you are correct, we're here to discuss not the ability to have any building, but the size of the storage building that you feel is appropriate in this backyard.
Right. And if there wasn't the variance for the size, he could still put the equipment in it and his wife could still exercise in it.
Yeah, there wouldn't, it is, the building, the covenants and our ordinances require that accessory buildings used to be, support the residents who live there. So it's not, what it's designed to prevent is somebody building a storage shed in their backyard and then renting it out as a mini storage for somebody else. But if the accessory building is built and used to support the people residing in the house on the premises, then it would be considered an accessory building.
Okay. Any other discussions? Okay. Is there a motion? I would move to approve application V20-4 with the recommendations from staff on the 4 recommendations from the staff on page 7 for proposed storage shed workshop compatible in design, material, and color with the existing property. Construction must substantially correspond to the plans as submitted to the board, subject to the terms of an issued building permit. Storage shed building shall only be used for personal storage, personal use, and not for any business purposes. And storage shed building is approved in lieu of a rear yard detached garage. No building permit may be issued for the rear yard detached garage on this lot. However, a building permit may be issued to convert the storage shed to a detached garage if the current or future owner is able to provide sufficient access to that rear yard. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Those opposed?
Aye.
Okay.
We have a show of hands, please. Can we have all those in favor of the variance, please raise your hand. Okay, those opposed, please raise your hand. So we had a 4-to-1 count, Margie. So a 4-to-1 vote is an approval of the variance, and we will communicate a summary of your action to Mr. Korb, which should allow him to move forward with the project.
So we are on to application V20-5.
And this particular application is a multi-lot application. It applies to multiple lots, so it's quite lengthy, but we're talking about 4 different addresses at 651 Pheasant Circle, 652 Pheasant Circle, 657 Pheasant Circle, and 658 Pheasant Circle. And so we're discussing 4 individual platted lots, which are the proposed location of 4 individual dwellings, and the requests that are before you are for both minimum front yard and minimum rear yard setbacks. So even though Mr. Hers is at the back table over there, I'm going to turn the microphone over to him, and he's going to run slides and talk at the same time.
Yes, so as Dean mentioned, we do have 6 different variances that impact 4 different zoning lots. And so what the story is the Georgetown addition was originally approved in 1974 and was replatted in 1977 and was constructed, this portion of it, which is Pheasant Circle, was constructed in 1999. And so what we have is we have a cul-de-sac which has mainly remained vacant until recently. The order of construction is the building at 640 Pheasant Circle, which is the corner here that I'm pointing to in the aerial photo. This was constructed in 2002. The property across the street to the east, which is 2448 Pheasant Lane, that was constructed in 2017. And then Roger Bacta, who is the applicant, purchased the rest of the vacant lots in November and February of this year. So November of 2019, he purchased the lots 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, and 15. And that was early November of 19. And then in February of 2020, he purchased lot 12. In mid-November of 2019, he submitted for and was approved and issued building permits for lots 19 and 15, which have been addressed as 646 Pheasant Circle and 645 Pheasant Circle. And both of these projects, both of these single-family dwellings are nearing completion, at which point the applicant, Roger Bacta, came to staff and approached us about what it would take to construct houses on lots 10 and 14. And I'll show you a plan here that shows his original layout. So this is lot 10 and this is lot 14, and this is the next phase of construction that the applicant would like to pursue. And you'll notice that because of the nature of the shallower south lot lines of each of these two lots, lots 10 and 14, the corners of the proposed structures actually encroach into the front yard setback area. The front yard setback area for this particular subdivision is this line here. It's in your packet, but I've got it on the screen. You can see this is the 25-foot setback line, and there is a little over 4 to 5 feet or so of that corner that encroaches into the front yard setback area. And so when the applicant was speaking with staff, we started also discussing, well, what's he going to do when he gets to lots 11 and 13, because they're even shallower as they are kind of on the peak of where the cul-de-sac bulges out, and they have a much larger encroachment. If you look closely, you'll see that the buildable width of these two lots here is only about 20 feet, which is very, very, very shallow. And most building construction is between 30 and 50 feet in depth. And so as we identified that building constraint, the applicant went to his plan designer and came up with a plan to construct single-family dwellings on these two lots as well, so that he could resolve both of them in a single variance application rather than making it two different variance applications. And so basically what we have is we have a front yard setback variance on lot 10, a front yard setback variance on lot 14, a front yard and rear yard setback variance on lot 11, a front and rear yard setback variance on lot 13. So there's, in total, we're talking about 6 different variances. All of them are either front or rear yard setback variances. So when we look at the uniqueness of the property, the applicant states that there are a couple of factors that are unique about this. And the first is that the radius of the cul-de-sac at the end of Pheasant Lane is 60 feet, and the current standard for a cul-de-sac is 50 feet. So we have a radius that's 10 additional feet, which eats into the lot depth a little bit and makes them unusually shallow. Staff would agree with that typically if you had a 50-foot radius, you would have an additional 5 feet of depth, which would help a little bit. And maybe you probably wouldn't need variances on lots 10 and 14. You still probably would on lots 11 and 13. And he also states that the shallowness of the lots really decreases the buildable area, particularly on lots 11 and 13, which is, as I mentioned earlier, is only about 20 feet. I'll mention that the minimum lot depth in the R1 zoning district, which this particular subdivision is zoned, is 100 feet. That's the minimum. Most are more than that, but the minimum is 100 feet. In this case, neither of these lots have a full depth of 100 feet because of the cul-de-sac. Now, we're not asking for a lot depth variance because these are what we call pre-existing non-conforming platted lots of record. So because this is an approved plat, the applicant is allowed to build on them without any variances because it's the lot that is pre-existing and non-conforming as to the requirements, but the code does allow for those types of subdivisions to still be built on. So we aren't asking for minimum lot variances, but we do have what we would call substandard depth lots, and that's part of the argument that the applicant is making as to how his property is unique. And looking at the adverse effects on the neighbors, the applicant states and staff agrees that for the most part, because all of the structures and the properties that are seeking the variance are at the end of the cul-de-sac, that's a dead-end run, you won't have a lot of through traffic, and you're not going to have a lot of people outside of those residents that live in the cul-de-sac that will be affected. So for the most part, on the front yard setback variances, the only people that will be affected are those residents that live in that area and are on that cul-de-sac. Additionally, because you have the wider radius, you are still going to have quite a bit of distance from the center of the cul-de-sac to the front of the houses, because you do have 15 feet between the curb and the property line, which is an unusually wide distance of right-of-way that exists between the curb and the property line. So in addition to the 15 feet that's being proposed here, you will have another 15 feet. So your properties, the buildings will actually still be set back 30 feet from the curb. So you still have a fairly significant setback that should minimize any effects on the neighborhood. Additionally, when we look at the rear yard setbacks that are being proposed for lots 11 and 13, what you'll see is the buildings, in order so that they don't have to have more than a 15-foot any less than a 15-foot setback on the front, the applicant moved those buildings further to the west and east than he did on lots 10 and 14 here in the site plan. And that reduced the setbacks from the required 25 feet to about 17 feet and 16 and a half feet. And so what we did is we took that dimension and we drew a line here on the aerial photo, and then we measured 50 feet back from that. And the reason we did that is because typically you have a 25-foot rear yard setback requirement. That's the requirement. And the reason we have that is so that you have 50 feet between the back of one structure and the back of the other one that sits back to back with that particular house. And so what we did is we showed what the 50-foot mark is on the east property here. We have over 50 feet of clearance still, even with the proposed setback. So even though we have a substandard setback that doesn't meet the whole 25-foot setback next to the property line, because the neighboring properties have rear yards that are set back more than the 25 feet, that's the minimum requirement, we still have 50 feet of separation. On the west, because this townhome sits at an angle here there's about 30 or so square feet in this triangle that encroaches into the 50-foot area, but for the most part, we still have a 50-foot separation between the back of the townhome structure and the proposed building structure that the applicant is showing. So the distance between the back of this building and the neighboring property is nearly 50 feet, and on lot 11 and on lot 13, it's over 50 feet. And looking at unnecessary hardship, what we have is the applicant states that denial of any setback request for development on these 4 lots would result in them being unbuildable, and staff would agree that they are unusually shallow, and it's just not very reasonable to build a structure, a dwelling, that conforms with the existing neighborhood and have similar building houses or similar dwellings as what we have in the existing neighborhood without some variances, particularly on lots 11 and 13, where we only have a 20-foot buildable depth there. Staff would also note that typically if you just had a minimum 100-foot depth to the lot, which is the minimum requirement, you'd have a 25-foot front yard setback and 25-foot rear yard setback. That would leave you with 50 feet of buildable area, which is 30 more than what we have here. And if that were the case for any of these 4 properties, if we had a 100-foot depth lot all the way across, none of the variances that are being requested would be necessary, and the applicant could build his proposed structures without any variances. Looking at the effects on the public safety and health and welfare, staff and the applicant have talked about the visibility of traffic and pedestrians. That's one of the main reasons that we have front yard setbacks, is to make sure that we have good visible distance and area for children and animals that may be putting themselves in harm's way unintentionally, and so that we don't create any safety hazards by having sight distances or sight triangles that are blocked by structures. We don't have that in this case because we do have, again, 30 feet or more between the front property of the front of the building and the curb of the Pheasant Circle Street at the cul-de-sac. And we also aren't increasing the risk of flooding or fire spread or decreasing and blocking light, because on that rear yard setback side, we still have 50 feet or more of separation between the 2 structures. The existing structures that are neighboring and abutting to lots 11 and 13, and the proposed dwellings on lots 11 and 13. When we look at the conformity with the general spirit and intent of the ordinance, one of the purposes of these ordinances for these setbacks is to provide adequate sight lines for pedestrians and vehicles, as well as adequate light, air, and privacy. The setback regulations also help secure safety from fire spread, flooding, and other danger, and to prevent overcrowding and undue congestion of land and people. In this case, the applicant will still remain adequate building setbacks for the front to make sure that we still have good sight lines and preserving those sight lines for pedestrians and vehicles. And in the back, we also have that distance that would still, that 50-foot setback distance that we look for, or the code tries to, the intent of the code is to provide or prevent or preserve 50 feet of separation between the two properties, the 2 dwellings that butt back to back. And so we do have a number of possible findings on the bottom of page 8 and 9, which kind of summarize what we've gone through here. The alternatives for the board is to approve all of the front and rear yard setback variances as are being requested by the applicant, with or without any conditions. The board may also approve a lesser setback, meaning lesser setbacks than what's being proposed, or they could, because we have 6 different variances that are requested, you could approve 4 or 5 or 3 of them, but not all 6. That's another option that you have. And the third option is you could postpone action if additional information is needed. Or the fourth option you have is you could deny the variances that are being requested if the appropriate findings of fact cannot be made. Staff would recommend that the applicant's setback variance as requested be approved. The Pheasant Circle lots are unique, and we believe that the applicant's plan is compatible infill construction on substandard lots that have been difficult to develop and have remained vacant for over 40 years. Development on these lots would create additional housing for the community and put 4 vacant lots into productive use for families that would be, and the proposed structures would be compatible with the existing neighborhood and add to the existing neighborhood. If the board wishes to approve the proposed variances, we do have a couple of conditions that we would recommend. One is that as part of the development of the vacant lots, the properties will need to be graded to direct stormwater runoff to Pheasant Circle away from the neighboring properties. And then the second is that a gutter and downspout system be constructed for each of the dwellings to direct stormwater runoff to Pheasant Circle away from the neighboring properties. And the purpose of that is because we have had pervious surface out there with the lots being vacant grass area, we want to make sure that any increase in stormwater runoff that would be produced by the proposed development goes to the street and isn't pushed onto the neighboring properties. This particular subdivision was designed to have the water go to Pheasant Circle, which then is carried to Pheasant Lane and gets into the storm system that way. So those would be the 2 conditions of approval that staff would recommend. And with that, we will take any questions that you might have of us, or go over any new, or any of the graphics that we went through earlier.
Questions for staff?
None.
Okay. I do have one question. So going back to the 50-foot on lot 11, and then going back into the townhouse to the west of that. So I know you said for the majority of that, we're still within that 50-foot. How much of that actually falls within that 50-foot? I mean, is that 10 foot of that
Right.
corner, or is that 12
so
foot?
That's almost 8.5 feet.
8.5
from
feet?
the corner over. And so if you do the math, you're looking at a little over 30 square feet or so that's being impacted by that.
Okay.
But this is about 8.5 feet. And so that's really the portion that is impacted in a way that is atypical, I guess you would say, because it is closer than 50 feet to the proposed dwelling.
And what actually is that on the structure? Is that like a covered patio, or what is it?
Yeah, I don't know specifically, like if it's a kitchen or a bedroom or something like that. I'm not entirely certain. What you see here is this area here is patio. This is a flat work.
Okay.
So this here is the roof, the different shade of gray, the darker gray is the roof. But as to what kind of room is underneath that, I couldn't tell you for sure.
Gotcha. And I guess I was looking at the larger part, but that's just a patio at that point in time.
Here that owns that property.
Yeah, I'm the homeowner.
Okay. As soon as we get done with staff, we can bring you up for that part. Any other questions for staff?
I just have 2 items that I'd like Mr. Hers to clarify for me and for the board. Of the 4 lots, are there any garages that would have a setback of less than 20 feet?
No.
Not the house, but the garage portion.
Right. And so this here is a 25-foot setback for lots 10 and 14, and these are the garages. So on lots 10 and 14, the garages will be set back 25 feet from the property line. On lots 11 and 13, the garages will be set back 20 feet from the property line and 35 feet from the curb.
And then could you clarify the distance between the property line or around the cul-de-sac and the curb line in terms of clarifying the amount of clear space that we have between the curb line and the right-of-way line.
Yeah, so if you look at the cul-de-sac here, you have a 60-foot cul-de-sac or right-of-way for the cul-de-sac, but the actual paving, if you measure it across, what you'll find is the radius is about 40 feet. So what that means is you have an extra 10 feet on each side.
So the point is that although the radius of the right-of-way is 60 feet, not all of that 60 feet is taken up by paving, which means that there is a fairly substantial amount of green space behind the curb before you get to the property line, which will make the actual distance of the structures from the curb line not
Abnormal.
not appear abnormal, because there's more green space in the right-of-way than you would have on a typical cul-de-sac.
Right. So you've got a 40-foot radius of the actual pavement, and you have a 60-foot radius of the actual right-of-way, so that gives you, 20 extra feet, which, if you look at both sides, it's a 10 extra feet on each side, if that makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Okay, can we hear from the applicant? Please state name and address.
Roger Bapta, 1220 West North Street. The reason why, like Dustin said, the cul-de-sac is just more than, normal, typical cul-de-sac that we do now. That's why, those two houses where they are so close, and 20 feet, I can't build anything in 20 feet. There is no way. Because if you see the setbacks on those two lots, they're only 20 feet. In the back side, to the west lot in the back, we are not encroaching after, if you approve my front setbacks, we're not encroaching so much in the back. I don't know how much, Dustin, was it 8 feet?
Yes, if you're talking about this distance here?
Yes. No, about the encroachment in the back side.
Into the 25-foot rear yard.
So we have 18 and change, 18 feet here, so it's a 7-foot encroachment, basically.
Only 7-foot encroachment we are doing in the back. We're not encroaching large amount in the back. So if you approve that, this whole neighborhood is really decent neighborhood. I don't want to put any small homes that would impact this neighborhood. I want to keep everything the same. All the homes that I do, usually they are very nice homes, and this area will dress up real nice after I'm done.
So what is the approximate square footage of each of these houses then?
Between 1,600 to 1,700 square feet, but 1,600 it's it's just for comfortable living space. I'm trying to put 1,600 square feet homes.
Gotcha. And are these going to have basements underneath of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Any questions?
And currently, since they're unoccupied, is there issues with the drainage from the existing lots back onto the existing properties that you know of?
Right now, those two homes that I just did, I had to just bring all the water back to the front because there is no drainage easement in the back. So we just brought all the water from the back to the front. So we are not draining in either side of the lots to any neighbors or in the rear side.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant from the board? Okay, thank you, sir.
Yep.
So comments from interested citizens? And please state your name and address.
Terry Cummings from 679 Georgetown. I'm the president of the association. And I've lived there since 2006. And I think you addressed some of the drainage problem that I was worried about coming back into our area, because the backside of the bottom of the where we live, the one where Frida lives, it's got not a drainage problem, but it does accumulate water when it rains real heavy. So I'm worried about drainage coming from the other properties over to our side of the buildings. But I noticed he put a fence up. I don't know if the fence is going to go completely up to the end of the road or not, but there's a fence there now that he built. And ever since the lots were empty, there's like a spring down there somewhere that there was always something, water laying on that, in that field. So I don't know if building a house is going to take care of where the water is. There going to be sump pumps, there's going to be things, water pumping out toward our side of the property or not. So I'm not sure of that. So,
And where exactly on this is your property? Sorry.
well, mine, Frida's, mine's up on the other end because there's 23 units in there, so I'm up at the top end. But Frida's, what's your 679, 677, right?
Yeah, mine.
That's hers right there. And I can bring her up to talk.
Duplex. It is a duplex, but this is my unit and this is my deck. And what you're saying is you want to put that and cut that off right there like that. So that property would be right at the corner of my deck.
Okay.
And this is all my grassy area that I have.
Okay. And excuse me,
I'm not gonna have any.
Frida, you can come up here and talk.
ma'am, can I have you come up to the podium and give your name and address, please?
Frida Steyer, 667 Georgetown Road. I pointed out that my deck is that one right there. And the one next to me, we have an attached home, and that is my neighbor Judy. And where he wants to put that extended line is right up to her house, which would encompass part of her deck.
So when you're talking about the line, you're talking about the minimum 50-foot setback actually comes up to that.
The 50-foot setback is going to be clear back into our houses. That's not right.
You know, what this diagram is intended to portray is this line here, where my cursor is, would be the back side of the proposed dwelling. So the proposed dwelling will not encroach onto this property. And what this diagram is intended to show is that there would still be almost, but not quite, 50 feet of separation, which is the standard between the two dwellings.
Okay, do you see that white line that goes down there in between?
This here.
Yes?
Yes.
That is a drainage ditch that we had to incorporate from our 23 units, excuse me. The ones down where he lives are a little bit higher than ours. And so that water all flowed down toward these units, and so they had to put this little drainage thing in there to direct that down to a drain hole, which is at the south end of that white line. And when it rains, that all often will get pretty full and pretty close to my deck. But it'll overflow that drain hole, that drain ditch. And they had put a little, I believe the previous owner of those 23-unit lot had put a ridge to the right side of that white line, which is the drain, to try to prevent any of our water running over into that property that they're now developing, so that it would run down into that hole. And I think we've been told that that goes down under the ground there along Crawford and eventually flows into the pond at Presbyterian Manor. That's what we've been told. And but anyway, that 50-foot variance, that house is going to be right on, I mean, right now the new houses don't even have a backyard that's hardly wide enough to even put a play set in or anything if you have children. And now he's going to try to make it even smaller, the backyard even smaller. I mean, they'll come out their back door and there'll be they'll be able to talk to me in a normal voice. Especially my neighbor. I know he's going to try to put a fence up there, but still, we'll hear their voices in their yard. They'll hear everything we say. We basically are going to lose all our privacy. And these were built so that every unit would have privacy. Look how much yard all the other units there in our development have. And he's taking all of our privacy off. And I don't even think he owns any of that.
Dustin, you're going to have to somehow articulate and explain that none of this development is encroaching onto Georgetown Village townhomes.
Are you talking?
I get that. See, they're not coming over under our, they're not coming on our.
Go ahead and come up to the podium, please, sir.
Just the 50-foot, they're not within 50 foot of the one. None of the properties coming onto ours. They're still going to be. You mentioned a 7-foot variance, but this says a 9-foot variance.
Yeah, right. 9 is correct. I misspoke when I was
You
talking.
said 7, but it's 9. So they're going to be
At one
closer,
end-
9 foot
At
closer
one
to
end, it's
us.
7 feet, at the other end, it's 9.
9 feet.
But this unit on Unit 10, it's all.
It's 25 foot.
I know, but the fence has already been built past that one, hasn't it?
Yep, up here.
So I believe.
It's not encroaching on our property.
Does the townhome
Right.
development have a privacy fence around it, or is it open?
We did it one
We did it one
time.
time, but we don't anymore. We never put it back up, so there is no privacy
Because
fence.
when I recall that the planning commission required Georgetown Village townhomes to have a fence, and so that's why I was asking.
Who's talking, you?
I'm
Oh,
talking.
excuse me. Can't see anybody's mouth.
Mr. Bill Plumley developed the Georgetown Village townhomes, and that plan went before the planning commission. My recollection was the planning commission required that Mr. Plumley put a fence up around the perimeter of the townhome project. So when you were talking about Mr. Bakta putting a fence up, I was surprised because I thought there was already a fence around the townhome development.
It blew down.
It wasn't in the covenants to actually keep the fence up, so.
Yeah, we never.
Approved to rebuild it, so it never got rebuilt. I wanted it rebuilt because it's right behind my house, but it's not.
I wanted it rebuilt.
Yeah.
But everybody on the north side who didn't have a problem didn't voted for it.
Well, I
against
might
it.
be able to help with that because I think the planning commission required that the fence be maintained, but I will confirm that for you.
Okay. Any questions?
And I'm very concerned because in previous years, like he said, that vacant lot, which has the cul-de-sac in it, held water in 4 different places. And when I moved in, there weren't any trees in them, but there was water. But now there's trees down here in this left corner, this right lower corner. And those have grown up in where that water stands. And then on the left side, well, over on the right side, there was a spot just to the south of his present building that he's just finishing. There was a big area in that there on the right side. And over here on the left side, there was 2 spaces over there where there was lots of water standing. And that's one reason why they built that little ridge on the right-hand side of that drainage ditch, was to keep our water from going over there, but in a way it was also to keep that water out of our area.
Okay.
So is his fence going to be on top of that ridge, or is it going to be?
Any proposed fence would have to be on the applicant's property line.
On the applicant's side.
It would be on his side of the property.
It's my understanding that Mr. Plumley built the ridge on the Georgetown Village property itself. He didn't build the ridge on what was then Ellie Ritter's property. So if the ridge is on Georgetown Village Townhomes property, that means the fence is going to be outside of the ridge, or it's going to be east of the ridge.
Okay.
But
So on this little house here, is he planning on having any backyard at all? Because it doesn't appear there'll be any space for a backyard.
What the request is, that's before the board this evening, is that the minimum setback that's required from the back of a house to the rear property line, the zoning ordinance requirement is 25 feet from the back of the house to the rear property line. Mr. Bacta is requesting a variance to allow that rear yard setback to be reduced to 16 feet from 25. And so even though the 25-foot minimum is a very small backyard,
It's going to be even smaller than this house here.
So the request is that these lots would have a smaller backyard even than the homes to the north.
Yeah, this is very small already.
Right. Yes, if you could, please. Could we have the applicant address that, please? If you could go ahead and have a seat and let him.
Oh, sorry. Can I go up there?
Well, we need you at the
Yeah,
mic.
Use the
Come back.
laser pointer, Roger, so you can
Yeah.
use the
Back
mic.
there to the garages, right behind the garage. Reason why I moved the garage that way on the both sides, kind of curved that. Okay. Right, an angle. So the backyard is bigger right here besides 16 foot. That's why I moved the garage beside having the garage straight like that. And there's a patio right here. And that has more than 25 feet in the back. Same here. I have more than 25 feet because I wanted to have more backyard, and when they come out, they have more backyard beside having a small backyard.
Correct.
And that's why I moved those garages that way. And so that way they are sitting here, not here, or not doing any activity in the back, right, closer to the property.
Okay.
And you see this area is huge. If kids want to play, that's a big area on the boat. I mean, it's a very big area for the kids to play or do anything. So my biggest thing is just to sit in the house, in 20 feet was just typical. I can't do it, so.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay.
Did this all start because they made this cul-de-sac too large?
Ma'am, you need to come up to the podium, and we're just about done with it at this point.
Did this all start because they made the cul-de-sac too large to start with?
The reason for this is because when it was originally platted, the size of the lots weren't, they were smaller than what were originally required at that point in time, but it was approved. So the platting is there, so there's no changes to that. All he's looking at doing is trying to get the variances for the setbacks so he can have comparable homes to what's in the existing area to fit onto those lots. So your question earlier, on the bottom part of that, where it forms into a triangle, that is all backyard and property.
Backyard for these people on that house?
Yes, backyard for those people on that house.
Oh.
So the only thing that's actually ended up happening.
And can they build something on there?
The only thing that's ended up happening is the backyard, the backside of his house to his property line is going to be shorter than what is normal. There's still going to be grass, it's still there, it's not going over the property line, it's just shorter than what is currently required by code.
Okay, is that property owner going to be able to build in that triangle area?
In that area? Well, the house and the garage is not going into that area.
I
As
know,
it's
but
sitting now, it would be yard.
But like we just had some people here wanting to build in their backyards.
If they wanted to put a garage,
If somebody came in and applied for a permit to put a garden shed in that little triangular area, we would issue a permit to them for a garden shed in that area if it met all the setback requirements.
But just a garden shed, they can't bring in another garage or,
Well, I don't think anybody could get access or make a garage
well, those
fit back
people would
there.
have access to it.
Ma'am, we're only here to discuss the setbacks.
Okay. Well, I was just asking about, is this whole thing, the whole platting thing, causing problems because the cul-de-sac was made too large?
right. But the cul-de-sac is what the cul-de-sac is, and all we're looking at now is the variances for the setbacks for them to be able to build a home. And
But they
if
can't make the cul-de-sac smaller to regulate with all the other cul-de-sacs in town?
it's already platted the way that it is.
At the time, that you have to recall that I have a two-word explanation for this, and the two-word explanation for it is George Etherington. George Etherington was the developer who platted Georgetown Addition. And George Etherington's philosophy was to maximize the number of lots that he could create and sell. And the way you maximize lots is by making them small. And so there are some lots that are in the vicinity of this area that are only 83 feet deep, not even as deep as this. So it is something that goes back to 1971, when the Georgetown Addition was originally platted, and the minimum lot sizes and a lot of the things that we have in place today were not in place in 1971. That was a long time ago, and this has been inherited from that original time, and one of the reasons why we're going from 1971 to the present before these lots are getting developed is just because the way George Etherington laid them out made them extremely challenging to build on. And so one of the reasons that we have the variance process and this process is when we have a mismatch between conditions on property and the rules that the city has for setbacks and things like that. The variance process is there to give builders relief so that we don't end up with this just being vacant forever. Because they're platted lots, but our feeling as a staff was that people would rather see normal-sized homes getting built with some reduced setback than they would to try to see tiny homes or miniature homes or whatever built on these lots because they're so shallow.
I understand the city's viewpoint because they want more housing, but you'd think that it would be more respectful to do the housing that are already there and keep them.
So if you could articulate for staff or the board what harm you think that this plan is doing to your property, then we can do our best to address your concern. But if your concern is that somehow this developer is going to come onto your property and encroach into Georgetown Village townhomes, that is simply not the case. Nothing he's doing is going to touch a blade of grass or anything on the Georgetown Village townhomes. He has to stay on his own property. And the only question before the board here is how close can the back of houses that are built there be to that common property line?
Well, I think 50 feet is too close.
Okay. And we are going to close public comment at this point in time. So, questions, comments from the board for anybody?
Nope.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move that the applicant's setback variances be approved as requested with the following conditions. And those two conditions be that the properties need to be graded to direct storm water runoff to Pheasant Circle away from the neighboring properties, and that a gutter and downspout system must be constructed for each of the dwellings to direct storm water runoff to Pheasant Circle away from the neighboring properties.
Second.
Okay. It's been motioned and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposing? Okay, motion is carried.
I just wanted to make a couple comments for the benefit of the Georgetown Village Townhome Owners Association. One is that, and it's staff's job to supervise that, Mr. Bacta is going to have to grade these lots, which is very unusual in Salina, but he's going to have to grade them so the back of the lots, instead of most lots in Salina, the backyards drain to the back and the front yards drain to the front. Mr. Bacta is having to adjust these lots so that the backyard at the common point is the high point, and every drop of water that falls on that lot is going to have to drain back to the east so that none of the runoff from these lots is getting into Georgetown Village. That's fairly unusual, but that is a condition that the board imposed. The other thing that I think some people who live in the eastern part of Salina know and some don't know, we have a lot of what are referred to as shale veins that are just underneath the surface, and basically they're springs or underground rivers that run all the time, and they emerge at certain points, and you could be in the middle of a drought like we are now and still see seepage or standing water because there's little veins of groundwater that are running underneath the surface, and they're coming out at certain points. And so if there's a shale vein that's coming out on one of these lots, Mr. Bacta is going to have to deal with that with drain tile and sump pumps and things like that, because people in East Salina that have that condition generally have to have sump pumps in their basement, and they're going to have drain tile in their basement, because otherwise it's going to impact the basements of homes being built there more than it's going to impact neighbors. So we're trying to take precautions so that Georgetown Village takes care of its drainage and water, and Mr. Bacta is going to have to take care of his drainage and water in a way that doesn't impact Georgetown Village.
There's one house that's already built. What happens with the...
Hold on one second, sir.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry. So we'll get to public forum because this one has already been closed at this point in time. So after Mr. Andrews' comments.
Yeah, so that was my closing comments as far as that business goes. So in terms of administrative items, we have none.
Okay.
In terms of other business, we do have an application that is going to be filed by our deadline for the November meeting. So we do anticipate having our November meeting and having an application for your consideration in November, and that would bring us to public forum.
So we are now open to public forum if you have a question or want to make a comment.
There's already
Come
one
up to the
house already built in that lot, and there's someone living there, but the spouts come right down and just run out onto the ground. How is that going to be addressed with him having to run everything to the circle?
So him running everything to the circle at this point in time is just based on the 4 lots that we have just discussed.
And
So
not the other lot, lot 9?
Can you point to the dwelling that you're concerned about?
Line 9, I mean, the lot 9, the one that's already built.
This one right here?
Yes, the one that's living in it. Someone's living in it now.
I can tell you that our building official has practically been living on that lot, dealing with drainage, but it's more about the concern of this neighbor here in terms of having any runoff there. So are you telling us that the drain stops are running to the back?
The ones on the side are just running straight out, and the ones on the back are running out. I don't know where the ones on the back are actually going to. How's he going to address the water running out of the back to get to the Pheasant Circle if the drain spout is just running out to the back?
The way it is explained to me by our engineers and by the building official is even if the downspout is facing west,
right,
and it comes out,
yep,
the grade of this lot is such that the high point of the lot is right here where the fence line is. So even if water comes out that way, it's still going to drain.
It's still going to drain back to the circle.
That way, yes. And I guess one thing that we'll have to do, and Mr. Hers and I will have to get involved with, is that doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because if you're going to have a drainage that's all directed back to the street, you should have your gutters and downspouts designed so they take everything back this way. And I realize that you have a pitched roof, and this roof slope is still going to drain it to the back, but the idea is that this is the high point, and that everything that comes back here goes back around the side of the house. So there has to be some swales here and here to get the water back. But We have one other subdivision in Salina that's out at Wildcat Circle. It's out in the southern portion of town, and there was a similar requirement there, and from that's all built out now, and from what we can tell, it's working. But the high point of the mid-block is here, and it's unusual, but they've got the lots graded so that every drop of water that falls back here goes this way. And we are working our best to have a grading plan for Mr. Bacta and get these lots graded so they slope back. But I don't know that we've gotten to the level of detail as to which way drain spouts are facing. I couldn't tell you where drain spouts are facing on Wildcat Circle, but what I do know is we've had surveyors out, and the grade is highest here and lowest here, so that the natural drainage slope is to go this way.
But I just noticed recently that we had a lot of more water laying in the backyard behind our 2 pine trees just recently. So I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it, with a lot of rain or not, but it always was wet back there after it rained. But now there's a lot of pooling, and I had our Total Turf come out, the people that take care of our sprinklers, and there was no leaks or anything that would cause that. So I'm not sure if that had anything to do with it or not. I haven't investigated enough, I guess.
Well, I can't even remember the last time Salina had a measurable rainfall, so it would be hard to say that it was caused by runoff from a rain event. But I can tell you that this owner here is on the phone constantly with city staff raising those same concerns. And city staff is that what they don't want is any pooling back in here, just like you don't want any pooling back in here.
Right.
And so we're doing our darndest to make sure this is graded back so that this is the high point and everything goes back this way.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Thank you.
All right, so we're end of public comment. Motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
So moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 You're done.